Martha Holbrook, a 45-year-old pregnant black veteran, stood speechless as her racist boss fired her on the spot. 7 months pregnant with her late husband's miracle baby, she just fixed a deployed soldier son's bike. Now, with rent due tomorrow, everything was lost. Fairfield County had never been kind to black single mothers, especially not to 45-year-old pregnant veterans. Martha had learned this harsh reality after losing her husband, David, during his final deployment with the Army's 82nd Airborne Division 13 months ago. The military funeral with its precise rifle salute and folded flag did little to fill the emptiness or pay the mounting bills. The miracle came 3 weeks after the funeral. Martha discovered she was pregnant. The doctors called it rare but possible. David's final home leave had left her carrying his child, a medical marvel at her age. The life insurance barely covered the funeral and David's outstanding medical bills, forcing Martha to downsize from their small rental house to a 2-bedroom apartment in the older part of town, where the rent was cheaper, but the ceilings leaked when it rained. The bicycle repair skills that had once been her specialty in the Army's Logistics and Maintenance Corps became her lifeline. Pinewood Bicycles had hired her because Vernon Tucker, the perpetually red-faced owner, knew she could rebuild a transmission with military precision, not because he had any sympathy for her situation. "I'm running a business, not a charity for your kind," he reminded her whenever she requested time off for prenatal appointments. His warnings hung in the humid air of the shop 5 days a week, alongside the smell of chain grease and rubber. For 11 months, Martha had been the first to arrive and the last to leave, never complaining when Tucker paid the white mechanics $3 more per hour despite her superior repair record from 20 years of military service. She'd become an expert at stretching her veterans' benefits, cooking large batches of stew that could last 3 dinners, and picking up odd repair jobs on weekends. The jar labeled Baby Fund in her kitchen held exactly $427.38. Not nearly enough, but a start. It was during the hottest week of June when Tyler Mitchell showed up outside Pinewood Bicycles. A skinny 10-year-old black boy with red rim eyes and a mangled blue Schwinn that looked like it had been run over by a tank. As Martha would later learn, that's exactly what had happened. "Can you fix it?" Tyler asked, his voice wobbling dangerously as Martha stepped outside for her lunch break, one hand gently supporting her swollen belly. "My dad gave it to me before he deployed with the 75th Rangers. Mom says we can't afford a new one." Martha knelt down carefully, her pregnant frame making the simple motion a deliberate act, and examined the bike. It was a limited edition retro Schwinn Stingray, custom modified with engraved handlebars showing Tyler's name and his father's military unit, with special Army Ranger decals on the frame. The front wheel was twisted beyond recognition, the frame bent at an awkward angle. "What happened, sweetie?" Martha asked, recognizing the military patches identical to those on some of her former unit members. "Left it at the end of our driveway. Mr. Wilson's logging truck clipped it when making a delivery next door," Tyler explained. "Dad spent months finding this exact model and customized it for me. Said it's just like the one he had when he was my age. It's one of the only things I have from him until he comes home." Martha glanced through the shop window. Tucker was on the phone, his back turned. "I'll fix it for you, Tyler," Martha heard herself say. "Bring it around to the service entrance after we close at 6. "Really? How much will it cost?" Tyler's face brightened instantly. Martha thought about the unpaid electric bill sitting on her kitchen counter, the approaching rent deadline, and the baby supplies she still needed to purchase. Her hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly. "Don't worry about that," she said, ruffling Tyler's hair. "Just bring the bike." That evening, after Tucker left and she locked the front doors, Martha let Tyler in through the back. She assessed the damage more thoroughly under the shop lights, drawing on 20 years of military maintenance experience. The front wheel was a total loss. The frame needed straightening in their hydraulic press, and the handlebars required delicate restoration work. "I need to order some parts," she told Tyler, taking breaks to ease the pressure on her lower back. "Can you come back on Friday afternoon?" But the 4th of July parade is Saturday, Tyler said, worry clouding his face again. "I know, honey. I'll have it ready, I promise." 20 years in the Army had taught Martha never to make promises she couldn't keep. After Tyler left, Martha drove to Harlow's Hardware and spent $83.47 of her grocery money on parts Tucker didn't stock. Nearly a day's wages gone on a bike that wasn't even her responsibility. The specialized parts for the limited edition Stingray were particularly expensive, but she refused to cut corners. For the next 3 evenings, Martha stayed late at the shop, carefully rebuilding the Schwinn piece by piece after Tucker had gone home. She'd take regular breaks to rest her pregnant body, drinking water and stretching as her military doctors had instructed. By Friday afternoon, the bike looked almost new with all its special customizations intact. When Tyler came to pick up the bike, his eyes widened with disbelief. "It looks better than before," he exclaimed, running his hand over the freshly painted frame. "Wait until I tell Dad on our next video call." The boy was so excited that neither of them heard the front door open. What the hell is going on here? Tucker's voice cracked through the workshop like a bullwhip. Martha turned to see her boss standing in the doorway, face contorted with anger, his gaze shifting between her pregnant belly, and the gleaming bicycle. "Mr. Tucker," she began, instinctively straightening her posture as she'd been trained to do before superior officers. "I was just using MY Shop, my equipment and company time for free repairs." Tucker cut her off. "After I specifically told you we don't do charity work, especially not for," his eyes narrowed, gaze dropping to her stomach, then to Tyler, implying something Martha refused to acknowledge. "I paid for all the parts myself," Martha explained calmly, maintaining the discipline 20 years of military service had instilled in her. "And I did most of the work after hours." "Most but not all," Tucker retorted. "I checked the security footage. You've been working on this during your lunch breaks for days." He turned to Tyler. "Take your bike and go, kid." Tyler looked at Martha uncertainly. She nodded reassuringly, and he wheeled the bike toward the door, pausing only to whisper, "Thank you, Ms. Holbrook." Once Tyler was gone, Tucker turned back to Martha. "I've overlooked a lot because you're a decent mechanic, but this crosses the line. When you're on my clock, you work on paying jobs, period." "That boy's father is serving overseas with the Rangers," Martha said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. A different kind of knot from the baby's kicks. "His bike was a gift from his dad." "Not my problem," Tucker interrupted. "What is my problem is an employee who can't follow simple instructions. And frankly, in your condition, you're becoming more of a liability every day. Clear out your toolbox. You're fired." Martha hadn't seen the small crowd of customers who had gathered by the service counter, drawn by Tucker's raised voice. Among them was a tall man in his 50s wearing a faded denim shirt with a 101st Airborne pin on the collar, quietly observing the confrontation. As Martha packed her tools with trembling hands, tried to calculate how long her last paycheck would stretch with a baby on the way, the man approached Tucker. "Excuse me," he said, "but I've been waiting for someone to look at my bike chain." His voice carried the easy confidence of someone used to giving orders. Tucker's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, sir. Let me get one of our mechanics right on that." "Actually," the man said, glancing at Martha, "I was hoping she could take a look. I watched her work just now. She's got a real touch with these machines, the kind you only get from military training." "I'm afraid Ms. Holbrook no longer works here," Tucker said stiffly. "That's a shame," the man replied. "In my experience, veterans with that kind of skill and heart are hard to find." He handed Tucker a business card. "Jackson Whitfield. I own Whitfield Manufacturing over in Cooperville." Tucker's eyes widened slightly at the name. Whitfield Manufacturing was one of the largest employers in the state. "Why don't you reconsider your decision?" Whitfield suggested. Tucker glanced at the card, then at Martha, clearly torn between pride and the desire not to offend an important potential customer. Pride won. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. Whitfield. Company policy." Whitfield nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Policies are important." He turned to Martha. "Ms. Holbrook, was it? When you're finished here, I'd like to speak with you outside." 15 minutes later, Martha emerged from Pinewood Bicycles for the last time, her toolbox heavy in her arms. Whitfield was leaning against a sleek black pickup truck in the parking lot. "That was quite something in there," he said as she approached. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Martha replied, embarrassed. "Don't be. I saw a master craftsman, a veteran with integrity, and a person of character." He nodded toward her toolbox and glanced at her pregnant belly. "Need a ride home?" Under normal circumstances, Martha would never accept a ride from a stranger, but something about Whitfield's direct gaze and the veteran's pin on his collar told her she could trust him. Besides, the thought of walking 5 blocks with her heavy toolbox in the June heat was daunting in her condition. "That would be very kind, thank you," she said. During the short drive to her apartment building, Whitfield asked about her military background and how she'd learned to repair bicycles. 20 years, Army logistics," Martha explained. "I could fix anything with wheels. After I lost my husband last year, it became more than just a skill." "And the baby?" Whitfield asked gently. "A miracle," Martha said softly, her hand on her belly. "David's final gift before his last deployment." Whitfield nodded solemnly. As he pulled up to her building, he reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. "If you're looking for work, Ms. Holbrook, give me a call. Veterans like you deserve better." That night, Martha sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by bills. Without her job, they had maybe 3 weeks before facing eviction. The local news played quietly on the ancient TV in the corner, background noise to distract from her racing thoughts. And now, a local story that's catching attention online. The anchor was saying, a pregnant black veteran was fired today for fixing a deployed Ranger's son's customized bicycle free of charge. Martha's head snapped up. To her horror, there on screen was cell phone footage of her confrontation with Tucker. One of the customers must have recorded it. The clip showed Tucker yelling, followed by Martha's calm explanation about Tyler's father and the special bike, then ended with Tucker's dismissive, "Not my problem" line. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by worries about bills and the baby's kicks. Martha had finally fallen into a deeper sleep when the shrill ring of her phone jolted her awake. The bedside clock read 5:47 a.m. Early morning light just beginning to filter through the thin curtains. "Hello?" she answered groggily. "Ms. Holbrook." It was Mrs. Fincher, her elderly neighbor from the first floor. "I'm sorry to wake you, but there's something you should see outside. There are people gathering in the parking lot. Nice people and nice cars. One of them asked me if this is where Martha Holbrook lives." "What?" Martha sat up suddenly alert. "Who are they?" "I'm not sure, dear, but there must be at least a dozen. One gentleman said something about millionaires." "Millionaires," Martha repeated, certain she had misheard. "Yes, that's what he said. There are 17 millionaires outside waiting to speak with Ms. Holbrook. I thought you should know." Martha threw on a simple maternity dress, quickly braided her hair, and hurried downstairs as fast as her pregnancy would allow. What she saw in the parking lot made her stop short. At least a dozen expensive vehicles were parked in a semicircle around the building's entrance. Men and women in business casual attire stood in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. In the center stood Jackson Whitfield, who smiled when he spotted her. "Ms. Holbrook," he called, walking toward her. "I hope we didn't wake you too early." "Mr. Whitfield," Martha replied, bewildered. "What is all this?" "These are friends of mine," he said, gesturing to the gathered crowd. "We're all part of a foundation called Veterans Forward. Each of us was helped by a veteran who expected nothing in return at a critical moment in our lives. Now we do the same for others." A woman in her 60s stepped forward. "Eleanor Tmont," she introduced herself. "I own Tmont Orchards. 40 years ago, a kind Army mechanic fixed my delivery truck for free when I couldn't afford repairs. That saved my first harvest. When Jackson showed us that video of you last night, I knew we had to come." 1 year later, Hometown Heroes celebrated its grand opening on Main Street. The shop featured a state-of-the-art bicycle repair center, a youth apprenticeship program, and a fleet of refurbished bikes available at low or no cost to military families. Martha stood at the entrance, her healthy 6-month-old son David Jr. cradled in one arm while she cut the ribbon with the other. Behind her, 17 investors beamed with pride. On a wall of honor near the entrance hung a single limited edition Schwinn Stingray with custom engravings and military decals, donated by Tyler's family after his father returned safely from deployment. Beside it was a photo of Martha in her Army uniform, receiving a commendation for her work in vehicle maintenance. Underneath, a simple plaque read, "For those who serve others while asking nothing in return." Jackson Whitfield had been right. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, but sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you back even more. As Martha watched Tyler and his father demonstrating bike safety to a group of children, she realized that her military service hadn't ended when she took off the uniform. It had just found a new mission. If this story of veterans' dignity and community support touched you, please leave a comment showing respect for our service members and single parents working against the odds. Have you witnessed someone standing up against discrimination? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories that celebrate those who serve others. What would you have done in Martha's situation?